The experience you're having right now is a thought. It is a manifestation of your mind. It is an interpretation of an external circumstance. And that's all subjective. Hello and welcome to the Sutra Squad podcast, brought to you by One Deep Breath. My name is Seth Barron. It is a tremendous joy to be here today with my amazing, beloved superstar Sutra Squad, Sarah Page Hall.
Hello.
And Sally Moore.
Hello.
We are going to talk about the verse of the Yoga Sutra. This is probably the one, like if I was actually going to tattoo a Yoga Sutra on my body, it might be this one. It's like, it's like, every single sutra is perfect and beautiful. And there's no favorites, but this is one of my favorites. But first, let's just take a quick moment to check in. And what's a word that describes how you feel right now, Sally?
I'm just going to give a sentence because I was thinking activated before we came on together, and then we come on together for a little bit before we start this, and I'm just slide right into grateful. So grateful. From activated to grateful.
Amazing. That's a journey. There it is. Sarah Page, what's a word that describes how you feel right now?
As normal, similar to Sally, but I'll take it a step further. Blessed.
Yeah. I feel like full. I'm just really present to like a real beautiful like fullness. Like I feel fully present here with the two of you. And I was at a work event and all last week that like really filled my cup as I'm starting a new job and like really feeling great about my choice, honestly, and really grateful to have a job that also like gives me the time and space to like be my whole self. It's a really unique privilege, to work someplace that really actually seems to be putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to how they want employees to show up as their whole self. And it's, special. I'm grateful. So today we've been in the series where as we were rounding out 2025, we're recording this, in December. We've been sort of going through some greatest hits before we start again at the beginning in January. And when we thought about which verses to include in this series, like this is one that I put on the list that was like must do. So we're skipping ahead now into the fourth chapter of the Yoga Sutra. And just to sort of give us the breadcrumbs of the structure of the text, the fourth chapter, the final chapter, there's only four. The first chapter, the Samadhi Pada, that describes the, if there was to be a goal of yoga or an end state of yoga. And I always find it so fascinating that Master Patanjali begins at the end, just to give that, there's this beautiful sense of like the unending cycle of this work that we begin at the end. And then the second chapter, the Sadhana Pada, the chapter on practice. So it's like, here's where you're going to go and here's how to get there. The third chapter is the Vibhuti Pada, which is sometimes translated as the chapter of powers. And like, here's what rises up along the way to meet you, which are the mystical powers of the yogi. And last week we talked about this fascinating, like sparse and powerful verse of like how we derive strength from our association, from our friendship. I think that's something that is a lived experience of all three of us, of deriving strength, like from real friendship, in the biggest way, or even you could say of loving kindness. Like if you've ever had a moment where you believe in yourself, and part of the way you validate that belief in yourself is because you know you have people in your life who love you and believe in you. And we were talking about, actually, it's a really beautiful reference too from last week's, Brene Brown gave a beautiful talk on a podcast. And one of the frameworks that she talks about, and she talked about in this one specifically, is power and the operation of power, and that there's power with, and that's the power, like that's shared power, and there's power to, and that's like personal agency, power from, like the source of that power that arises from within. All of this, by the way, like I could quote Yoga Sutra that validate all three of those dynamics. And then there's the fourth, which is tricky, which is power over. And we're not going to spend any more time on that except to say that's a different kind of power than the one that we're interested in here. But that this idea, like that sutra, Maitreya Subalani is the text, is a real testament to the power of power with, to, and from. And part of what informs that is, I think, this week's verse. So now we're in the 4th chapter, which is the Kaivalya Pada. And Kaivalya is a word that means, often it's just translated as freedom or liberation. And so it's the freedom of power to, with, and from. That there's a freedom that arises from that is inherent to, that is accessible to all of us, and it arises from within. And I think this week's verse really speaks to that. So we're going to look at verse 15 in the 4th chapter, so verse 4:15. And I will chant the Sanskrit, and then we'll get into all the goodness. And if it is available to you and you would like to, you can take a nice tall seat wherever you are. Of course, if you're driving or listening to us while you're on a walk or doing the dishes, you could just stand up a little taller too. If your hands are free, you could bring them in front of your heart. And maybe just take a moment. You can close your eyes. You could even also acknowledge the incredible fortuitous agency you have right now, that you can place your attention in an intentional way. That is truly a blessing. And if you'd like to join me, I will start with one big Om. Take a deep breath in. Breathe all the air out. And for Om, inhale. Chanting verse 15 from the 4th chapter of the Yoga Sutra. Vastu samye chitta bedat tayor vibhakta pantha. Vastu samye chitta bhedat tayor vibhakta pantha. Vastu samye chitta bhedat tayor vibhakta pantha. There's a word that we've talked about a bunch, chitta, that appears in this sutra. And chitta is consciousness, or your mind, or your thoughts. So we know that we're going to talk about the content of our mind. Among many translations, I'll share a couple of words. Samye is the same. And vibhaktaha is separated or distinct. Pantha is path. So we're talking about like the path of our mind and the sameness and difference of these paths. And the translation from Master Sri Swami Satchidananda is very straightforward, and I think it's quite nice. Due to differences in various minds, perception of even the same object may vary. Sharon Gannon in the Jivamukti chant book gives, as is typical, a little bit more of an artistic, expressionistic interpretation or translation. Each individual person perceives the same object in a different way according to their own state of mind and projections. Everything is empty from its own side and appears according to how you see it. So there's the same and the difference. The object is the object. Our perception of it varies by virtue of our individual experience, karma, history. So it's a teaching. And the reason I love this verse so much is that even the ancients understood that the fundamental nature of perception is subjective, and that we can never see the world through the eyes of anyone else. And so we can never truly know how anyone else perceives even the same object. And it's like how you could hold up something very mundane, like something like I'm holding a pen. Like, this is just a pen. It's just a pen. It has the logo of the company that I work for. So now it's also like a symbol of my employment. And my dad collected antique fountain pens, and I have a fountain pen case in my apartment, and I have a selection. Both Sarah Paige and Sally have seen it. And sometimes when I hold a writing instrument, agnostic as to like its material value, I remember how much he loved collecting pens, how meaningful it was to him, how he loved the written word, how he loved like the way ink flows out of a fountain pen nib. That the tip of a pen is called the nib, N-I-B. And he had this funny like distaste for ballpoint pens. And so now I think about all these like endearing memories of my father. I'm just holding like a cheap plastic pen. And yet it can go to so many places. So that's sort of a general overview of the verse that we're talking about this week. Sarah Paige, is there a translation that really calls to your heart that you really loved when you think about this verse?
I really, when it goes deep into this, I love the textbook of yoga psychology by Ramurti Mishra, MD. No, Mishra, sorry. He's also very straightforward. He goes, though the object is the same, the projection is different because of the different nature of mind stuff, chitta, and the object. And then he goes, and I like this, it is common psychological experience, especially in projection technique, that different persons react differently to the same object. Those who have even slight experience on symbolic objects will easily understand that although the symbolic object is the same, different persons react differently because of the difference of their chitta. I just think that's so good. And I love also what Iyengar says, Light on the Yoga Sutras by Iyengar. Iyengar really gets right to the heart of the matter very quickly, I think. And he seems like a grumpy man, and he might be, but he goes, due to the variance in the quality of mind content, each person may view the same object differently according to his own way of thinking. And then he goes on, but through the substance of nature or object remains the same, the perception of it vary according to the difference in the development, and I like that word, in the development of each person's consciousness. The way that I saw things last year is completely different than the way I see things this year. The way that I saw things last month, yesterday, last week, I had something happen that changed the entire way that I saw something. Last night in reading changed my perception around a lot of things. And so I love that it's so fluid.
Sally, what about you? Is there a verse or a version of this fascinating piece of wisdom that really called to you?
Yeah, I would like to bring to our conversation, the object remains consistent regardless of being observed by different minds, or by one mind in different states. So it's sort of like what you were both saying. In other words, the object exists independently of individual perception. And that's from Unravel the Thread by Ruben Vasquez.
That's such a fascinating like turn of it, that it starts
I
with the
have got to get that
sameness of
book.
the object. That's so interesting.
Well, and I loved it because even when you were talking about the pen, like I thought that was a perfect example, like how yoga is everywhere in a yellow pen. And you've just added, a story or a perception to the pen because that pen is from your work. So it's like, we have this historical story of the pen, and then we're always adding.
I once had the privilege to ask a very experienced Buddhist abbot in Bhutan a question, and I actually asked if he would share thoughts on shunyata, which is the Pali Pali. It means emptiness, and in Buddhist practice, like there's a sense of like seeing or attempting to discover the emptiness of things, and he thought, and he said, well, in order to understand emptiness, you must understand interconnectedness. And then he gave a little bit more, obviously, but his point, that I will do my best to attempt to summarize, his point was that the emptiness and the interconnectedness are inextricable. And I think, and again, it's very much this verse harkens to this same to this idea that like the object, and like and that translation just made me think of this, like that translation says that like the pen is the pen is the pen. And part of what we're trying to do in yoga practice is to like strip away all the stuff that gets in the way of the clarity of our perception of the pen just being the pen. But but all that perception, that's the interconnectedness, that like, in order to understand its emptiness, we have to understand all the things that we put on top of it. And then slowly try to examine them, to see what is real, as opposed to the story we tell ourselves. It's like piercing the illusion of reality, of our individual subjective reality, to get to the heart of something that is like capital T true.
Seth, you just hit on something that I want to expand on, because I'm also looking at Edwin Bryant's, Master Edwin Bryant, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and I'm not going to go into it because it's long. But
yeah,
what
he goes long.
He goes on. He does.
It's an amazing, very academic, but an amazing book. So
fabulous.
Good. Yeah.
But what he was saying was similar to what you were saying, and it's the perception of God and the way that each different people perceive God. Buddhists, Hindu, Christians, Jewish perceive God in a different way, but there is God. And that just to me is really, I don't know, meaty for me, having been raised in the church.
And this is where you get to this like real interrogation of like power over, power with, in the way that in many lineages, God is, we're instructed, certainly like in a lot of Abrahamic Judeo-Islamo-Christian faith traditions, you're actually like there's this, the instruction of like, what is God is presented as like, there's one answer to that question, and it's the only answer, and this is one way, and it's the only right way, and everything else is wrong. And, one is, I wonder, and I'm not a student of these traditions with this much depth, but I wonder if that's a modern construct or if it's always been that way. I think the answer is probably both. But even as a kid, I think, I don't know about the two of you, but I always wondered, like, is there really only one way? Like, maybe because I knew that I was growing up as a person of, so, I was born in a family of Jewish lineage. And I always wondered, like, are we really going to be over here saying like, we're the only ones who are right, and like the rest of the 90% of the world who isn't Jewish is just like totally wrong and they're screwed? There's a weird, how do I want to say this? Like, it's the exclusiveness that felt weird to me. And the lack of,
this is the only way.
This is the right, it's the rightness. This is the only way. And I know like part of what's really unlocked, I think a lot of deeper meaning here is, exploring that sense of rightness, because rightness has to imply a wrongness. And one big moment, in my spiritual growth and evolution was during a teacher training where I was in the program was sort of going sideways, and I was really mad at my teacher. I love you, Bethany. And I bet she remembers this because like it was a moment, and she had put on us like what's happening in the program. And like we were given a prompt for some inquiry around like, why does it feel like we're going sideways here? And what's getting in the way of your full commitment? And I came back in the next day and I was like, just, sometimes it really does. You got to walk up to your edge to lose the resistance, to push through. And I just had this moment of like not caring if I was going to make her mad or whatever. And I just was like, what's in my way is that I think this should be going a certain way and it's not going that way. And so I'm stuck in the rightness. And frankly, and I said even like, I don't think you're doing the thing that I think you should be doing. And I've been really mad about it. And and if anybody was in the room is listening to this, you might remember it. It was a moment. And then I like said it. And all of a sudden, like, first of all, it just got a lot lighter. Sometimes like when you just like get it off your chest, you just speak to it. And then you can even, and I realized like, I'm the one locking me out. I'm the one, it sort of became what I call my rut of rightness. I dig that rut and I dig in when I'm right. We have a saying, you dig in your heels. And when we get really committed to that rightness, it means that there has to be a wrongness. And I think this verse is an instruction to let go of that oppositional binary paradigm and get really curious about our own perceptions and acknowledge that others may have different perceptions. Like the fascinating mystery of how two people can have a conversation and they have the same conversation. And everybody listening has probably had this experience at some point in your life. You have a conversation with somebody and you think it went one way and you think you ended in one place. And like a couple days or a week later, you see that person and they make a reference to that conversation. And it's like, as if it happened on Mars to you. Like, it's like totally different. They heard something different. They took something different from it. Their experience of you was wildly different than what you thought your experience of you was and your experience of them. And we have a tendency to then like dig into a rightness. But the verse is teaching us that the same object, that conversation, as an example, can be totally different depending on all the fascinating points of perspective that each of us bring that is totally unique to every single one of us. So maybe an interesting place to go deeper is to consider, like, where are you committed to your own rightness?
So funny, I've been thinking about this because it's not even for me a where, it's a when. It's when I'm activated. When I get activated and my ego wakes up, which I believe my ego's trying to keep me safe. But it's kind of when you were talking earlier about clearing the mind, and I kind of don't think of it as much as clearing the mind as clearing my perception, so I can see the pen or the situation, and I can also see what my ego or whatever you want is adding to the situation. So for me, it's like, when I'm activated, whether it is like, this brings me joy. I wear a ring that my grandmother, it was her wedding ring. And I remember as a little girl, like holding her hand and touching it. And I wear this ring. The ring in my mind keeps me safe. This ring doesn't keep me safe. This ring activates a positive situation. If you ever, I mean, I wear it pretty much every day, but when I was in challenging times of my life, going through my divorce, going to court, blah, blah, I was just like rubbing on this ring. I was making this ring mean a whole bunch of stuff. So it's like, for me, I know that I'm committed to my rightness when I get activated, because I feel like then it's like I'm pushed into a corner and I got to get right here and safe and stand. But the wisdom and the win and the yoga comes when I say, just hold on. I'm in a courtroom. I'm being reminded of, actually, I have a really good example. My attorney years and years and years ago had an office downtown. The office has changed. It's become different things over time. And so at one point, our family had a property, a business property, and we had to have a meeting in there. It was then a therapist's office, and some therapists were talking about renting a space from us. And I was like, I've sat at this table before. I'm remembering this table, sitting across it with my ex-husband and his attorney. And now I'm with a bunch of therapists, and we're talking about, in my mind, a positive association. And then that place turned into, so when I stopped dyeing my hair, I took the money that I used to spend dyeing my hair on a monthly massage. It's a long story, but it's like the perspective of this room. So then the lady moved into that building. And so I was like, I have sat in this room with attorneys having really hard conversations. I've sat in this room with the potential of starting a new business, collaborating with some therapists. And now I'm sitting naked in this room about to have a massage. This room is meaning all kinds of things to me, but I got to remember, this is a building. These are walls. That's kind of how the sutra is like, can we not per se clear our mind, but can I see the room, the walls, and all the stories I have in the room?
I'm so taken by that story, Sally, because like, what a beautiful example of just like, it's the same object, it's the same room, it's the same four walls. And you've had three wildly different experiences in that same physical space, each of them true, real, and so different. And something we were talking about too is like before we started recording, was how like, and Sarah Page mentioned this, like how the shift is both like, between two people, like that idea of like, I see the pen as nothing, you see the pen as everything. And like how I see the pen today and how I see the pen tomorrow, like different pen.
Well, and does the clarity arise not in we only see the exact structure of the pen, but the clarity arises that we humans have this amazing ability to see the object and we see more, but can we separate what we're seeing, so it's not commingled? And that, I mean, the truth is when you first picked up that yellow pen, it was like anxiety. Oh my gosh, that reminds me of highlighting in a book and taking an exam and call it like, and it's like, it's the clarity.
That's so fascinating, right? Like I just held up a yellow pen for those of you just listening and not watching the video. Like it's literally just a yellow pen. It's only yellow because that's one of the colors of the brand. It's not the actual ink isn't yellow or anything else. But then Sally went to someplace like I hadn't even thought of that. Like, it's so amazing. It's just so amazing. And Sharon Gannon, who is one of the co-creators of the Jivamukti yoga method, has a quote that I reference all the time, which is, do you want to be right or do you want to be free? Do you want to be right or do you want to be free? And like part of my answer, and Sharon G, I mean, it would be like, if you ever listen to these words, please know how grateful I am for all of the wisdom and teachings that you have passed down, to the teachers who have inspired me so much. But I always say like that my answer is like, I love being right, but I want to be free. And so if I want to get up to the freedom, I gotta, and I don't always like this, to be clear, and then short term, but like I gotta give up the right and the wrong. I gotta let go of being right because it's just going to lock me out of freedom, because freedom is a big part, I think, of the freedom that we're talking about is the power to see, the power from within to seek clarity. And the discernment, which is not judgment, the discernment of what is and what is not, which is different than right and wrong.
And I love with the discernment, like to me, I was thinking about how do I catch myself when I'm moving into the rightness and actually losing freedom. And I do think sometimes a simple question is like, wow, like asking myself, do I want to be right or do I want to be free? And what can I discover? And so I do feel like, and it goes to last week talking about loving kindness. Like, can I pause? Can I look at what I'm thinking? You know, can I back up a little bit and choose to live in a way that's moving me forward in line with what's most important to me and what's present in this moment?
Sarah Page, do you have a tell when you can feel yourself falling into that sense of your own rightness? Like, how do you know when it's happening?
Yeah. I don't know that you can see it. I get very quiet, which is unusual for me. I will get very quiet. And I was going to say I see things in a different way just because of my upbringing. I go to, I am wrong instantly. I immediately go to, what did I do wrong? This must be my fault. In our lineage that we have shared, the Baptiste, we have feedback. And I am very good at receiving feedback because I'm like, I know, I didn't do that right. And then I think about, is there right or wrong? Or is it just the way I perceive doing, leading a class? That works for me. So my tell is I get very quiet. And if I get really angry, and it doesn't happen often, but when I get really angry, honestly, physically, my eyes shift. I get really, my nervous system is activated. And what I do then is say, I need to remove myself from this situation because I will probably say something that I will regret. I haven't thought it through. Even though I am very spontaneous in the way I talk and the way I teach, I think very clearly about if it's an important conversation. I wait. I sit with it. I had a situation where I got very activated and I called Seth. And the thing that you did for me in that moment, and I do it now for myself, is I get grounded, sit down. He goes, well, where are you? And I said, oh, well, I'm in the living room. And he goes, no, physically, where are you? And I said, oh. And then I went, okay, I'm sitting on my chair. What chair? The Eames chair. I have an Eames chair. I have an Eames-like chair. On the Eames chair, he goes, well, what are you looking at? I said, I'm looking out the window. There's Halloween decorations up or whatever. He goes, what are those? So it got to be very specific. And I have to focus when I get into that. And I get into my rightness a lot. And I want to go into, like, we all work in a studio. And, that can get very emotional. What we do as teachers is very personal. And if somebody says, I didn't, I've had people say, well, a lot of people say XYZ. Well, that takes me down a rabbit hole and into chitta and I have to really remove myself from that. Their perceptions are their reality, granted. And I don't have to be a part of it. That's their perception, not mine. So I get stuck in my rightness a lot, but I'm getting better and better at pulling back a little bit, looking at it objectively. Where am I? Who is around me? What is the truth of this situation as opposed to the perception that I am bringing in, the story that I am bringing in? What is the capital T truth? And yeah, that's how I handle it.
I think it's really important. I think Brene Brown talks about it, about putting on your armor, like just knowing the thing that we do when I'm going to call it getting agitated, like for me. And it doesn't have to look like getting angry. If getting mad is what was safe in our family, maybe we noticed that trigger. For me, it's more getting sad, getting quiet, like you said, shut up before they find out, like, that you're not capable.
Let me speak to that because I love this. You know how when you go home, well, when I go home, I am 64. I'm a grown woman. I am doing well. I navigate through life well. I go home, I'm 10. It doesn't matter because my mother still treats me like I'm 10. That's her perception of me, which is wildly different than my perception of what is real for me. And that's just the way it always is. Our families see us in a certain way, and especially with mothers. I don't know about you, Sally. You have children and grandchildren. I have a child. I see her very much like she was when she was, little, and she's not. So she's in the back room. She just said, I'm not at all. So I know.
Well, and it's interesting because we get something, right, from being right, from our rightness. And then I think there's this, what do you get from it? And then what does it take to consider another perspective?
Maybe the interesting thing there would be when we're in that vortex to say, what is their perception? How do they see it? When I feel hurt or angry.
And even looking for me, I'm like, okay, when I write and I'm going to dig into being right, then I get to blame other people for everything. And I get to not take responsibility for my own life. But then to consider another perspective, the weird thing for me is it starts with me not being so hard on myself. Like giving up control and responsibility for everything and everyone, and then taking care of myself and doing the best I can. And I think once again, it comes to getting to that space where I can take a breath. Sometimes it's a big calming breath, and sometimes it's a freaking lion's breath. I've already taught my grandkids at 2 and 6. I don't know about the 11-month-old if he gets it yet, but I'm like, hey, you guys, we're going to do a little thing called lion's breath here. We're going to scream at the top of our lungs, and then we're going to dance it off. So sometimes, like, I feel like for me, moving more toward freedom, if that's what I want out of this practice, is pausing, doing what I need to do to shift the energy inside my body, whether that means calm me down or activate. And then I can better see what's right in front of me and what am I commingling with this dreamed of future that's not right here, right now, or this brutal past that is or isn't there, just doesn't matter. So it's just, if I think getting back to humanness, I am human doing the best I can. You are human doing the best you can. We are humanity doing the best we can.
I had a very interesting conversation with my stepson regarding his dad, who is my ex and it's fine. But he had some insight to this person that I never considered ever in the 17 years we were together. So it was a really good way for me to step back and perceive this person that I loved and lived with for 17 years in a whole different way. And it gave me ease. For me personally, a practice for me is, what is their perception? Take the me out of it. Okay, take me out of it. What is their perception of the situation? They're in chitta, they're in some kind of activation. Listen, I mean, I know we don't get political, but have you ever seen so much chitta in the ether around politics right now? And the people who feel that they are right feel that they are right.
I mean, the Oxford Dictionary word of the year is rage baiting. Isn't that like, to me? I was so sad when I heard that.
So interesting.
It made me so
And especially
sad
for us.
because I thought about how like we're in this cultural moment where we're like actually finding this like perverse pleasure in the activation of other people's anger, right? Rage baiting. I mean, like to bait someone into rage intentionally.
Well, is it interesting that if we don't have practices to bring ourselves back to sift through what's really here, what's all this background noise, if we can't get to those practices, I think the rage baiting just goes on. And is it a way for, I don't know. I mean, I have to be honest, when I'm activated, sometimes it feels good if someone else gets activated too.
Well, it's a validation of our ego. It's like, oh, if I'm mad and then you're mad and I make you mad, then like now my madness is like somehow validated.
And then though, the next step for me is if I can step a step back from that, that's not really true for me.
I have to, you talk about rage baiting, Seth, and what was going on right now and how sad that is. I went to school and college in the Deep South. And in Asheville, North Carolina. My boyfriend was from Columbia, South Carolina. That's textile country. You had a lot of textile mills and factories. My college boyfriend's brother raised his children, worked in the factory, met his wife at the factory, was able to buy a house, was able to have health insurance, and had all of these things. And then when NAFTA came along, it took away a lot of that. His perception. And so I'm saying this not as a political statement, but then he lost the factory closed. The house was foreclosed on. He lost his health insurance. His life as he knew it, which was secure, was gone. Now, where do you put that anger when he did everything, quote unquote, correct, right? And then the government, in his eyes, his perception, took away everything. I found, because I did know him and I knew his family, I understood that in a different way than other people might have understood the anger. Do I agree with rage baiting? 100% no. But it did give me a different perception of the people that I deeply loved and grew up around who lost everything.
I've never heard this term before, but I'm just having a thought over here that is it one of the things that first we have to be able to name it? And now that there's a name for it, could there possibly be space to see it more clearly and then an opportunity to stand back?
I don't know. I mean, one thing, I think there's a couple things. Like one, Sarah Page, you mentioned like, seeking to understand another's perspective. And, well, of course, there's a tremendous value there. Something that I've made a practice of trying to really make intentional is not thinking other people's thoughts. Cause like, I don't know, like this is where we get into some of the subtle stickiness of how we navigate these ideas. Like, how do we take this verse of ancient wisdom, which is, again, it's amazing that even the ancients understood that all of us are the prisoners of our own perceptions, right? We're all stuck one way or another. Like I joke and I'm just stuck in this meat sack. And I can only see through the meat sack of this karmic appearance of my physical embodied form. And how often do we slip into, well, they think and this, and we project out. And so one way I tend to recognize that I fall toward a rut of rightness is when I start thinking other people's thoughts, when I start saying, well, they think, or they did, or they know, like, and like, then I have to ask myself, is that true?
Well, and for me, that true question in that moment is I tend to move to what they're thinking when I can't actually get clear with myself about what I'm thinking. And so that's it, right? If I can't get clear, and I have a devoted practice to trying to get clear, like daily, right? And if I can't get there, then I just need to be careful, because I think when it's like, I don't know where to start to clean my room, I'm just going to go into someone else's messy room and going, you should. You know what I mean?
Yes, the you should.
Shoulding all over
The
yourself.
you
Should.
is a bit, is like, yep. When I should all over
Absolutely.
myself and when I should all over somebody else. That's a big tell for me of like, whoa, easy.
Verbiage
Easy,
is so
queen.
important, right?
I don't know that other person's thoughts. I just don't. And like, so this comes up sometimes, like in family stuff. Cause like sometimes like we think we know someone and well, they think this or they did this and that, like, and what I know is my observation of behavior. So this is like the way I get out of it is, one is like when I'm like thinking other people's thoughts, I mean, is like when we tell ourselves the story of why someone did X or at least that's how it shows up for me. Or like assuming I know the antecedent to the behavior, agnostic as to whether or not I witnessed it. And even if I did witness it, that I'm seeing what I think I saw. And so sometimes I ground myself back to like, okay, well, what do I know? And what I know is what I've seen. What do I feel? What do I think? Sally, to your point, like my room is messy, so I'll just go into somebody else's messy room and tell them how to clean it all up as a way of getting out of what's so often the case, which is the discomfort of saying, well, okay, someone behaves toward me in a way that feels like, I mean, it could be a random person on the street and it could be my sister. And another one like that, like another way this manifests is like when it's happening to me, when somebody's doing something to me. That's like lately I've tried to like use that, like really pay attention to when that arises so that I'm like, I can give myself that moment to say, well, what's happening to me is a manifestation of my perception. What's happening to me is a response to stimulus. I don't know the thoughts of whatever informed the behavior that I encountered. And it can both be like, I can have my own assessment and discernment of how it feels, why, or what, like all that motivation and all that why doesn't matter, because that's just a way of validating my own ego. Again, getting into the rightness. And sometimes I can ask. Most of the time not always. And if I want to be free, I have to be willing to like let go and just say, well, like I know my own experience, or I can try to get more curious about my experience. And that's the only experience that I can ever try to really investigate and know. So there's the practice is to like turn that back around to say, one is like, how do I get a little bit more clear on my own experience? There's like we've used words like activated and triggered. Like, okay, what is my experience of that activation or that trigger? What is it? I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm I'm elated. And I try to like pause in that and like try to pull the thread of that, especially when for me, like around anger, or sadness, like, what do I feel? Not what did they do? Not why did they do it? Not all that. Like, okay, Seth, you're feeling activated. You're feeling triggered. You're feeling like frustrated. You're feeling disrespected. Okay, I'm feeling disrespected. What do I want? What is, and then I'm feeling disrespected. I feel unseen. I feel like my experience doesn't matter or isn't being attended to, or I'm not being attuned to. Okay, well, I can ask for that attunement, but like I can't control whether or not someone's capable of attuning to me in the way that I think I want or need, and that they're willing to do so, because I can try to invite people into, ooh, cute. There's balloons on the video. I don't know how that happened. Like, I can't control whether or not that person will do the thing that I think I need. And this is where it's like, we're the agents of our own healing. We're the ones who, like, we can't put that on the other. We have to take it for ourselves.
I really want to jump in here because we're talking about our feelings a lot, but I also think that there is a validation to our feelings. We do feel the way that we're feeling.
And that's what I'm trying to get at. It's like, can you just get clear about your own feelings? Like, can I just get clear about what I actually feel? And that, like, so I've referenced this before. This is like one of my favorite, framings from Tara Brach. There's an amazing one of her podcasts that I've listened to multiple times and will listen to multiple times again, because it's really a great one. She calls it 3 Teachings for Spiritual Practice. And, she calls it, 3 reminders. 3 reminders for spiritual practice. The first is awaken to your thoughts. Like, that the experience you're having right now is a thought. It is a manifestation of your mind. It is an interpretation of an external circumstance. And that's all subjective. So when the awakening is that practice of like being able to just say, well, okay, like, all that's happening right now is a thought. I don't know what that other person is thinking. I don't know why they did what they did. I don't know their full lived experience, even the people we have most intimate. And sometimes that's actually the trickiest, because it's the easiest to think we know. So all that's happening is a thought. Awaken to your thoughts. The second is feel your feelings. Feeling your feelings means like really engaging in a practice to name your emotional state. Like, name the emotion. I'm sad and I'm angry. Those are typically like more surface driven emotions. And so like, that's a good starting place. And then I'll try to keep going. Okay. I'm sad. What am I sad? Like, what is the sadness? The sadness is disconnection. The sadness is feeling unseen. The sadness is loneliness. The sadness is yearning for something deeper. Right. Like, and like giving and like taking just a practice and sometimes I just do this like by myself in my apartment. I just like say the feeling words. And I just try to let it free associate and say as many as I can. And usually there's something else that's much more about me than it is about anybody else, when I really just give myself the space to just feel all those feelings, every single one, and acknowledge the truth of those emotional experiences. Because your feelings are true. That doesn't mean they're facts. Like, there's a fact that this is the physiological experience of emotion that you're having, but that's also, like, not the truth, capital T. So awaken to your thoughts, feel your feelings. And then the third is remember love. So like, I take that as like, okay, I'm having these thoughts. I'm having all these emotional experiences. And what is the next most loving thing I can do right now? Is it just stand on my own 2 feet and take a deep breath and say, Seth, you're okay? It's okay to feel however you feel. And you get to choose how you want to act in this moment right now. That's the big power from within. Because there's nothing more empowered than standing at choice, intentional, aware, sometimes uncomfortable. But I have a choice. I always have a choice. And how do I choose something right now in this moment that is loving? Right. And I think that's a big part of why we do this. I think this is why I wake up early on Sunday to do this with you too, because I find this is always a loving choice. This is a space where I get to show up as I am, and really remember love. We do this for love. If you want to give us financial support, maybe we'll figure out a way for you to do that, dear listeners. But this is really just a project of love for the three of us, because we believe that this wisdom is needed and that it's vibrant and alive and it can inform how we live in a really powerful way. And so what I get from the rightness is validation, but it's near term, and it's validation of my ego. And when I have to give it up is, when I remember that I want something more. So every week we offer a prompt for some inquiry, and that can be for you to do some journaling or just to sort of keep on your mind and stay curious as a point of inspiration. Sarah Page, what's some inquiry that this week's conversation and the sutra has inspired for you?
This conversation inspired it a lot. I love the idea of what is your tell. Get curious around, feel deeply into the body, know what it is. I think that there's no way to, I want to use no way to get really curious unless you are honest and listening to yourself without judging, without making yourself wrong, without creating a story around it. Just real facts. Oh, okay, this is how I'm feeling right now. Get curious, lovingly curious.
Lovingly curious. That's good. How about you, Sally?
Super similar. I was just what belief are you holding as fact? And is that belief opening you up or shutting possibility out? And then what would happen if you chose to be your own most loving and honest fact checker? Just using the moment, the agitation, whatever, as an opportunity to separate fact from story.
Yeah, I think mine also similar, just a little bit of the matrix. Do you think that's air you're breathing? Again, without getting into anything political, but especially with what are you consuming and what is its impact? And there's an amazing technology journalist. I mean, she's OG, Kara Swisher, and she has a saying about digital social platforms that are often optimizing for what they call engagement. And as she says it, enragement is engagement. So you're consuming a diet of food and of information and of content and of stimulus. And is it, and to just get curious about, what are you getting from it? What is it lighting up in you? And how are you engaging with it? I know a lot of people who are really invested in on social platforms, to find their rightness, but it comes from a place of righteous indignation. I think that's really tricky. I don't mean that in a judgy way. I mean that in a compassionate way. And if you notice that you're consuming a lot of information, content in whatever context, and that's what it's bringing up for you, maybe just get curious about what you're getting from it, and if that's what you really want. We also offer a teaching tip every week, and all three of us are instructors of yoga asana. We give yoga class. As Sally said it, the best teacher is the yogi on your mat. So whether you are giving class, whether you're taking class, whether you're just listening, you have something that you can teach to the world. I'm certain of it. If you hear the sound of my voice right now, you have something you can teach to the world. So, Sally, what's one teaching tip you would give as an offering to students in or out of the studio?
I would, wherever you are, bring stability to the moment through your feet. Sarah Page talked about it a little bit earlier. Ground down the four corners of your feet and allow your feet to bring your entire being to the present moment.
I love this because I think we've all had the moment when we have the one student who is doing their own practice and and I want, when you you feel so seen when I do too. Notice where you get stuck in the rightness of how you're teaching. When that starts to happen, the person who is doing their own thing, step back, maybe just, why is it triggering? Where are you stuck in the rightness? Why is that so important? And then smile. Just smile about it.
My teaching tip is like, are you modifying that for a reason? Like when you see a student who looks like they're not doing the thing that you think they are supposed to be doing, to just like let yourself actually have a moment of curiosity and see if you can like get students into something and say, hey, I noticed you're doing this thing. Did you notice you're doing that thing? Cause certainly like what I don't know is what the experience of another person's body. And I think as like just a broader teaching tip in general, like just remember you don't know the experience of another person's body. And so as a way to think about like offering asana instruction from a place of like as inclusive as possible and as accessible as possible, like with the most simple, clear language as possible. And that when it's not happening, consider like, it's not the students who don't understand. That's me clearly not communicating something effectively. And then great. And then that used to take me down a whole story of my not goodness. And now I actually like have a little celebration even in the moment of teaching. Cause I'm like, oh, look what I'm learning. Ooh, those words totally failed. Great. Right? Like, you give a cue and nothing happens. And I used to just be like, oh, I'm the worst teacher ever. And now I'm like, oh my God, that's so fascinating. And so sometimes I'll say it. I was like, wow, that did not land. I see it in your bodies. Let me try this again. The right foot, like the other right foot, like let's all just step that forward. So maybe I'll break the pose down a little bit or something like that. Anyway, it's a lot more fun to be curious than it is to engage in, to be right. Yes. Oh, that's a great place to land. It's a lot more fun to be curious than it is to be right. I'll say it one more time. That's really good. I'm going to just chew on that. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun to be curious than it is to be right. And think about that off the mat.
Can I just maybe offer, is it possibly there's a lot more freedom in being curious over being right?
A lot more freedom. Thank you, Sharon Gannon. Yeah.
A lot more freedom.
Because I live that.
Yeah.
Curiosity
it's a lot more freedom
is not harmful.
Curious. Yeah.
I love you guys.
Same.
I love you guys. Sally and Sarah Page, thank you for being my friends. Thank you for being with me here in the Sutra Squad. And to every single one of you listening, thank you for your time and attention. If you found any benefit of these words, please consider subscribe, leave a review, share with a friend who maybe would find some benefit or interest in this practice of teaching and study and curiosity. And with that, we'll call it a day. Thank you so much for listening to the Sutra Squad podcast, and we'll be with you again next week.